We now come on to very much the main line of the wing gambit, our rock and roll way of meeting the Sicilian. We're a maverick, we're playing against the rules, we're going for a quick victory, and we're creating our own destiny. We're not following like a sheep. That's what the wing gambit's all about, I guess. Or maybe you just want to play an interesting game of chess. So, after the moves b4, the only way to refute a gambit is by accepting the gambit. And now I'll move a3, with the idea of just distracting that pawn as far away as possible, giving ourselves some open lines on this side of the board. And now very much the recommended move, anywhere you look at any theoretical manual, which I've seen. I obviously haven't seen anything. I can only see so much, but the main move really is now d5. Black reacts in the center against the wing attack. And I don't think the things to bear in mind really are, what are we going for? Well, we're going for this position with d4 and e4, right? So if we get that position, we're basically saying with this gambit, we have enough compensation. That combined with our open files on the queen side, our easy development. And let's remember, bishop d3, knight e2 is normally the way we want to play. So our f pawn can move. And also this knight we see come out to h5. This knight e2 seems to be our sort of subtle improvement on some other recommendations. On f3, it doesn't seem to have as much venom, the opening. And we're basically saying also, black, you can't bring your pieces out to natural squares, because if you bring this knight out, I will attack it. And in a lot of cases, if you bring the other knight out, I will attack that one. So you're going to be a little bit cramped. We may get into a middle game position. I might not win quickly with this opening. It's a positionally founded opening. I'm taking over the center. But when we get into the middle game, you're going to be struggling to find a plan, and I can improve and attack at the right moment. That's kind of what we're doing. So that's why black often plays this move d5, which is certainly one of the main options in the position, the main option. And it makes the most logical sense, not one of the main options, it's the main option. Because black doesn't want to sit there and suffer those things that we've just said. Black's basically saying, okay, look, I'm going to try to counter-strike, get my pieces in the game. And that makes, I think, again, it's logical because, those cramped positions that we had a look at briefly in the last video, we'll come to a lot more in the next video. Those cramped positions are not fun to play, and they're difficult to play. It's difficult to play when you're lacking space. So now, as in the rest of this course, really, this quite intense course, I honestly didn't think it'd be this big, this course, when I was filming, but it's turned into a monster. And I think it has to be done so you get full value for learning this great opening. And we're going to keep the lines open. So we want to take on d5. And if you're ever in doubt in this course, when you can push or open lines, gambiting requires open lines. And also there's a very standard idea why we can't play here, which, if it goes e6, great, but bishop f5 is just a good move. And we don't want black's pieces to come to good squares here. Let's open up. So we're taking on d5. And now queen takes d5 is the what we're mainly concentrating on here. This is the most commonly played move, most logical move. Black gets back the pawn, threatens to win our rook with this check. And this is certainly what we should be starting to concentrate on. Now, very quickly, if b takes a3, we even have an extra choice of going c4 here if you don't want a gambit. But there's a very promising move, and the rule is when they take here. So we're going to try. I'm going to try to in the videos why are you paying more money for the videos? I know it's a lot of money. The reason you're paying more money is because you're getting expertise of someone who's spent hundreds, if not thousands of hours, more likely perfecting these openings over a lifetime, playing them, their expertise, and that verbal explanation that you can come back to time and time again. That's what you're getting. So you're getting those 1,000 hours condensed in that payment. And thank you very much as well. It's what keeps me working and doing what I'm doing and creating more. In this position, we generally take the knight. When the pawn takes there, we're nearly always taken with a knight. This has been confirmed as our correct way to go. And after queen takes d5, well, here, I mean, knight f3 is okay, but I think in this particular case, d4 works well. And we can compare this to some lines of the c3 Sicilian, which I suppose this opening has the most similarities to out of any opening. So the c3 Sicilian is, well, guess what you play here? c3. And after this move, we get often this kind of thing here where the knight comes to a3. But this is a much slower approach. And by playing it in this manner, we get turbocharged, albeit we're a pawn down. But we get a turbocharged version. And after here, we've just got more open lines. We've got rid of that pawn on c5. And it's just, it's a nice little version. And we'll look at this more in the theory section. What I've got here is 3C, but I believe it's going to be the next video. Because in those videos, we're concentrating on lines where black takes on a3. So obviously we need to look at those moves. I find in practice, if we go back to this position here, when I'm playing blitz online at least, and I think that's a good way to try out your openings, black often takes on a3. So we're going to be looking at those kind of positions where we go d4, knight takes a3 there. But these positions are a little bit different after queen takes d5. The other thing I think we should look at is knight to f6. This is not so stupid. I remember when I was preparing for that game against Dragon all those years ago that you saw in the model game section, I thought this was probably a decent choice, but I then came to the conclusion that, okay, if I take on b5, and after knight takes, this is the idea, I just play b5. I got a very simple position I'd be happy playing. I preferred my pawn structure here because I've got more centralized pawns compared to these two. And I've got a very nice idea later on of going d4 and c4 and using these pawns in the center of the board because there's nothing really blocking those guys. And also just combine this with kind of standard developing moves. And I thought, okay, well, black might be okay here, but it's a very strange position, this one. And if I was going to pick a side, I'd pick white for those reasons I mentioned. Let's put some moves on the board. Bishop f5, developing. Before I push those pawns, I want to get my pieces in the game. So king side, normally the way you develop, because you can castle, get the king safe. I'm not going to be castling queen side in the wing gambit. And after e6, well, maybe there's some annoying queen here. And one of the things with the wing gambit is the bishop often comes to b2, as I'm sure you're aware. We're moving the b pawn. Our bishop sits on this diagonal. And now after knight d7, we're following Riewitz Rasmussen, Grandmaster from Denmark, 96. And here, we should bear in mind, we have this much more active bishop, and that makes it a little bit difficult for black to develop. And a move I like here, I don't really want to go bishop e2 and allow knight to f4, but actually a move and a plan that is quite nice, I feel, when there's a knight here. It's actually just knight c3. Just keeping things reasonably simple. That knight in the middle of the board of blacks is quite a good piece, so I want to try to get rid of it. And now I think black should support that knight. I'll get rid of it anyway. And if e takes, we have queen e2 check, which is very disruptive, because if you block on e7, I take here. So this is actually really bad, doubling black's pawns. And if queen takes here, well, now I'm going to go bishop e2 because I'm no longer fearing that one. And I'm going to castle, and then I've got my development then. And really, as I said earlier, once you have got the development, you can certainly consider using these pawns. And the A file is another asset we have in the position. Now, if knight takes in this position here, The problem Black has is he still has this sort of situation on G7, and we can even consider now, because Bishop E2, Knight here, it's still playable. There's nothing wrong with that. We can castle and give up the bishop, but even G3 makes a lot of sense to me here, stopping those ideas. So going back to it, Knight F6, we just take the pawn, we push on here, and I like this plan of Bishop B2. Let's get that knight into the center of the board first, but after we develop the knight, light square bishop, we're not quite sure where we're going to put it yet. So Bishop B2 and Knight C3 seems like a nice follow-up there. So now on to the main line. Queen takes D5, and be careful here. It's amazing how many strong players have taken here now and fallen for this and then resigned. This is, you know, the first thing in chess, always look at your opponent's last move and just make sure you know if there's anything horrible going on. And we develop a piece and we stop that threat. And now, again, the main move here, by quite some margin in this position, is E5. Black, again, deciding that having control of the center is important, allowing the bishop to come out. And if you play the wing gambit, you will get this position, definitely. Now, before we come on to the main move, I think we'll start with the less common alternatives, and we'll have a look at them in sort of descending order of popularity, actually. E5, the main move, that's what we're going to concentrate most of our efforts on here. But what about other options? Now, generally against other options, we can just take this pawn, unless he takes us. And the reason we can do that is it's going to either force the black piece to come over to that square where it's exposed. And a lot of our ideas in this position, as we're going to see, and we should probably talk about those ideas now. I mean, we've got to this position. This is the mainline position. What are we trying to do? Well, we're trying to take that pawn, and then we've got these two kind of mobile pawns, so we can use them. And we like the setup C3 and D4. Gives us a nice point in the middle of the board. And we also really like the idea, when the queen comes to D5, as it does in the main line, of swinging our knight around to B5. And the ideal square is obviously putting our knight into C7. So this is kind of our main idea. So, you know, what we're trying to achieve in this structure, and this dates back to Bronstein. Bronstein used to play this idea a fair few times in this position. That's who I remember when I've been looking at my prep, and his name springs to mind. But it is quite a fresh position. This position is not very well analysed, and I also find that a bit surprising. It's not played often. The Mora is extremely popular at club level. This is not. Why? I don't know. I don't think there's a good reason. So generally, we're taking here, and you know, if black takes that pawn back, we get a tempo. We go C3, whatever piece is there has to move. We go D4, and we go for this knight move. And this creates aggro for black. Black has only developed his queen at the moment, and he's going to have to waste a couple more tempo dealing with the threat when the knight comes in, dealing with the attack on his bishop when the pawn moves. So after knight to F3, well, let's put those moves on the board. Now, bishop G4 pins, and it allows us just to win that pawn back, really, I'd say. Okay, I mean, black can be super greedy, but we can actually now take this one here. Now, maybe black's brilliant idea was to take on F3. And here we should go queen takes F3. And black may suddenly realize that queen E5, which is often a good move, fails this move. Our king's very safe here, because when we take on this square, we're not just threatening the rook, we're threatening checkmate. And you can see black has just lost here. Nothing to do. So bishop G4, we obviously just take that pawn, and if the queens do come off, okay, you're looking at those pawns, you're concerned, but we got the two bishops and we have very useful pressure on the A file. And I don't think our double pawns are enough compensation for black. Another game of the legendary Shirazi versus Labat 2006. This is Shirazi's opening with white. He's one of the only players who plays it. Just shows some moves. When the knight comes here, my first thought will be I'm going to attack it. Why the hell not? And now Shirazi, really imaginative player, he doesn't even defend that pawn. He goes rook a4. Very, very imaginative player. If the knight takes there, it's going to get trapped. So e5. And now he uses those pawns. And also, he gives his bishop some great ideas. And you can see here that white's doing very well. So bishop g4, we take the pawn on b4. And now, if black tries knight c6, b5 is allowing that knight to come into the middle, and you can see then black's getting some pressure here. So we have to be a little bit careful. But I like just now the move c3. So we're just going to take the sting out of black's one idea. And here we can go bishop e2 if the knight ever comes in, and we have a better pawn structure. So let's say black develops, bishop e2, e5, and we can even play d3 here. And black develops, and after both sides castle, knight bd2. And this is not a stupid way to play. If black's going to play this line, and I think knight c6 is what he should do, and I'd say this position is roughly even. White still has the more compact pawn structure, and he has nice ideas of going bishop b2, rook e1. And the exchanges have helped white here, certainly his pawn structure. And at some point, as in the black line, this is actually a little bit like a good black line for, or Petrov, you could say, for white. When we get our rook here, we're kind of looking at e5. I've learned from my experiences in these positions, where we want to go c4, opening the bishop on b2, and then b5, kicking away the knight on c6. And e5 is going to be actually very hard for black to defend. Black does have more space, though, but we've got that easy plan we can play. So not so stupid, knight c6, but very rare. And the last thing black can play, if he's really greedy, is to go check. And, well, I mean, taking here looks kind of crazy. Excuse me. We lost our position there for some reason. So we had, rather than e5, the main move, bishop g4, pawn takes pawn, and then we had check here. And now queen takes b4 is one of the worst ways to set that pawn. We have a number of moves, but I mean now, because black's done something so weird, I think bringing our knight here, I mean, we don't need to go to a3 now. This one has ideas of knight d5, and rook a4 is actually going to be winning a piece. And our piece is just going to chase that queen around. Our knights are going to come in. This is brilliant, brilliant play. So I think black's idea here will be to grab this one and now take here. This is a bit better because obviously he's grabbed the pawn. He's done our damage over here, and we haven't got a knight that can join in. But again, I think we have very good compensation with our bishops and the open position. For example, knight c3. We're trying to come into d5, so let's say e6, stopping that one. And now the knight comes the other way. This typical idea. And this is the square you want to get your knight to when black is wandering around with his queen. Always look for your knight coming here. After something like queen c5, we keep gaining tempo. This actually happened in the All Grandmaster battle, Golubov versus Efremov, Moscow 2020. So we do have some strong players that played this. At least I think they're grandmasters. And after queen here, well, again, if you haven't got anything immediate, do not panic. White just castled simply here. Black now tries to develop, moves his bishop, and white grabs his pawn back. And now, after queen c3, rook a4. This is a very attractive idea in a number of positions. And the point is, we got rook c4, and after something like knight a6, d5 is even pretty much decisive here, because rook takes a7, we have rook c4 coming down here. Nice little unique pattern there. Okay, so bishop g4, not really impressing here. Now, if e6, well, we could go bishop b2. There's nothing wrong with that, but we could even go bishop e2 and just castle, bishop b2, bishop e2. But again, sticking with our principle of what we mentioned before, let's keep it simple. Take on b4, play c3, and now d4 is normally one of our follow-ups, but also knight a3 is, and it seems here that d4 is a good central move, but the quickest way to create a threat is getting our knight to b5. So we want to prioritize the moves that cause our opponent the most problem, and knight a3 is the one to play here. And we're playing this idea which is causing issues. I feel the queen should come back to d8. It has to cover this square sooner or later. One of the issues that black has is that black can never cover this square with knight a6 because we don't have an a pawn. This defensive mechanism never works because a rook takes a6. Advantage of the giving up those pawns on the side. So after queen to d8 here, well, now we've lost a little bit of the power behind that. So now we switch around to d4. And after knight f6, we're not going to win immediately here. Black's reasonably solid. So if we can't win immediately, we put our pieces on the best squares. There's no point bringing our knight in here now. Only when it was a threat we bring it in. If we could get these two moves in, maybe it's worth it. But it looks a little bit optimistic. So I prefer just bishop d3. Let's say both sides castle. And does white have enough compensation here? Well, I, again, totally believe so. It's a little like an isolated pawn position, but it's not isolated. So this is a bit of a better structure. We even have some pressure over here in certain positions, but with tempos up on those isolated pawn positions. And after something logical like knight c6, I quite like the idea of using that extra tempo. I mean, one move would be bishop c2, queen d3. Standard way to attack there. But I like the immediate knight e5 because we want, in actual fact, f3. We want to create pressure straight away. Now let's say the knight gets exchanged. Knight comes to d7. If it comes to d5, which seems quite logical, then knight b5. And we can even put the knight on d6 because we have this bishop a3. This is another use of this knight. Well worth remembering, actually, when we have a pawn on e5, because in a lot of positions, when you've got pawns on d4 and e4, you play the move e5, black captures that way, and we capture that way. So it's, if you can imagine that structure, we're thinking of possibilities and how you could get this pawn structure. And you can often get that, you know, with two pawns here. Black has a pawn on d6. Black has a pawn on d6, and you push, there's an exchange, and you get this. And actually, knight d6 is very annoying here. Maybe c4 first, because I'll put it on the board. Let's go. Well, should we go? I mean, this is quite a bad move because black's now weak here. Let's even go here straight away, right? And just to demonstrate why black can't take it, this knight is very strong. If black takes here, queen c2, and if black does take it, well, he can take it, but bishop a3 is the problem because we don't have that pawn on a2 again, showing some advantages. If the knight comes to d7, well, here we're going to play knight c4, and again, we have the same idea. And there's some little tactics here. We have loads of play if black doesn't do something immediate. If he does b5, one of the reasons this works is because of knight a5. Now we're changing our tact because e5 is dropping, but we have very strong move, bishop e4. And funnily enough, after this move, this is something black could easily fall into, but bishop e3 is, even though we're 2 pawns down, black is in serious trouble. I say my pieces, I wish they were my pieces, our pieces are controlling. So again, this d5 takes, knight f3. what's next? Well, e6, we just saw the simple plan. Knight f6 looks very normal, but this doesn't stop us from taking here. And we have more possibilities now. And, you know, if we can go knight c3, we will. There's no reason to go to a3 if it can come to more central square. But if something like e6 here, let's do that. And now a very simple way, if we don't have to sacrifice that pawn, the thing I like doing, I'm not going to give it away for free every part of the game. You know, I'm not a complete saint. I'm only going to offer it to you a couple of times at the start. If you don't want my gift, I'm not giving it to you later on. You're being rude. You disrespect me. You're not taking my pawn. So I'm going to go b5. So if you don't take my pawn, I'm going to put it on b5, which stops black's pieces coming to natural squares. And I actually don't even think we need to play d4 here. I would, again, you've got to think case to case. I actually think we put the bishop on d3 and the bishop on b2 and leave our pawn here. For example, bishop b4, castles, bishop d4, d3. The reason I'm not going d4, especially when there's a bishop on b4, I'm walking into a pin, and bishop d3, I wouldn't want to put my bishop here if the knight can attack it, but there's no way this bishop can be attacked, and I've got very promising setup attacking wise. This actually happened again, two very strong players, Beardston versus Saruana, who's a very strong up and coming Russian. And this kind of position, well, we've got castles, we've got knight e5 coming, we've got our queen coming to h3, and we've got knight e4 releasing these bishops. But another lovely maneuver, I think I've mentioned every piece there, except the rook on a1, and this rook a4 and swinging that rook over is another very promising idea, which I very much like. Okay, so knight f3, and now b takes a3 here. Will now be met by knight takes a3, of course. And we saw this kind of thing actually in that introductory game I had against Dragon, with ideas of, main idea of course is going knight here, and we haven't even had to play any pawn moves this, and our other idea is even bishop c4 in this position. Our pieces are coming very quickly. So when the queen's on d5, the strength for moving our knight becomes a lot stronger. So I feel this is not a good way for black to play. And black's main move e5 is an e5. It is the main line for a good reason here. Now, there's a number of fascinating lines here which I've spent a serious amount of time investigating. And c4 is that move that I did mention at the start of this course in the model game. Really interesting. But for this course, I think we will keep it as simple as we can. That is something, if you really want to get into the delicacies of this opening, you can. But for this course, I want to keep it in a setup which is a little bit easier to remember. And that is just with the plan that we've mentioned before, right? And the plan that we mentioned before is just to go c3 and try to get the knight to b5, like we had in that model game. Let's do it. So we're going to take on b4. Very, very simple. And now knight c3 is a nice move. So e4 will be met by this move, and black can't save that pawn now. So bishop takes b4, of course, played. And here, c3. This is where I differ to that model game. In a model game, I tried knight a3, but there were some problems with that one. Our suggestion is to play c3 first. I feel it's a bit better, actually. We have some more options. We have d4 coming quicker. And now, after bishop e7, playing knight a3. Slight change of move order. And again, you're likely to get this position when playing this line. Black does have some alternatives here. Now, first of all, if the bishop goes somewhere like c5, black's kind of asking for it, and he will get it. We could go knight a3 again, but that is too juicy a bishop over there. And I think d4 is just strong here. Black's idea might be to take, well, his only idea I can see is to take and go bishop b4 check. And now I like bishop d2. It's quite simple. And the point of this play is that after bishop takes, we take with the queen because our knight's coming to c3. Black should try to castle. So let's say knight f6, knight c3. And he will castle here. Do we have enough compensation? Well, this is one case where we might be reverting to play on these files. So queen e6, check here. And now after both sides castle, we again, I mean, this is one of those ones where I think dynamically equal is a very fair assessment. White's active position is much easier to play, but black has got his king safe. We're going to be using Delroy very quickly, and that pawn on its own could be enough compensation. We could use that in combination with our knight coming here. We use it in combination with the e file. And let's not forget that we can, and if we do win a pawn back, which is going to be better, start pressurizing over there. So one of black's better defensive ideas here with a position where, I don't know, you have to ask yourself, which side would you rather play here? And the thing to do in these positions where you may have some questions, and it's good to have questions. You know, you should never follow anything blindly without questioning it. And that's the case in these things, because, you know, I'd questioned this as well. And I came to the conclusion I'd rather be white because it's just easier for white to play. I haven't got checkmate here, a bit disappointing. I haven't opened up the king, a little bit annoyed. But ongoing wise, I have to not, you know, I always like target my opponent's king. A little bit disappointed I can't do that here. But I can still just play with this pawn coming straight into d6, supporting it, or on the e file. And I still feel my pieces have just had that energy which blacks are clearly lacking. And there's going to be many tactical moments coming up. This is all new stuff. So again, to show you demonstrations of this from practice is not possible because it hasn't been tried out. So maybe, I mean, bishop c5 there. I mean, okay, I did say it's asking for d4, and it really does seem to be. If you didn't like that line, you can always go back to the knight a3 ideas. But I don't like knight a3 now because the bishop has this strong diagonal. So I would be playing d4 here. I don't like that bishop on that strong square. Okay, another choice is bishop d6. And this move is a bit more common in the position. And now d4 doesn't come with tempo. And also, we don't have to worry about any ideas against f2. So I'm not playing d4 now. I think logically we're going for our other plan, which is knight a3. And now the knight is going to try to hassle here, or just prepare our development with bishop c4. Now, knight to c6 looks normal. Black has also tried knight e7. I don't know if it differs much with which square that knight goes to. But now I like knight c4. And here, because knight b5 is not really ever coming into this square because of the placement of that bishop, we're changing plans. And now this bishop is loose. And if we get a chance to take it and go bishop a3, let's not forget about that idea. We will. So let's say bishop c7. And here I'm quite attracted to the knight in the middle, when we're going to try to put our bishops on these two diagonals. And again, this is one of those ones with long-term play. Queen d8, bishop c4. Let's say castles. Well, even here, we don't need to go bishop a3. Let's use that tempo. And now we know where there's a target. We can go straight in with knight g5. Queen bringing in is a massive threat. And if h6, h4. Queen f3 is my next follow-up. Bishop a3, also very tempting. And this is very dangerous to black. And black can't ever take here because this is just going to be too much coming in over here. If black tries to stop that, we can come another way in. Horrible. So after knight a3, maybe knight c6 is also okay. And I think here we stick with that same plan. And again, it's adapting. Knight b5, not affected because the bishop is guarding. Bishop c4 is okay. But I like this knight c4 because the other thing is, again, if we get a chance to grab that, we've got bishop a3. And now, actually, you can see why the knight's not coming to this square. If the knight comes to this square, let's just show that, bishop a3, enough compensation because black can't castle. And we will get castled, and then we'll play d4 once we're fully developed, maybe before even opening up that king. That's why the knight's going to e7, of course. Now, if the knight goes to e7 here, we have another idea. Knight to b6. And this should work out pretty okay for us. Worth remembering that idea. If bishop c7 here, well, now we're going bishop a3. And black has to try knight e7 at some moment. There are a couple more lines that I haven't included in this video in the move trainer. And I've done that on purpose in this case. I've normally included everything, but I think some of the lines, as the videos are mainly trying to get the ideas across to you, are more important not to go through all the lines. But I mean, when I say I haven't mentioned them, I think I have mentioned them, but they go much in more detail in the move trainer. If you want to make sure, e4 I wasn't going to mention, but I think I should mention this advance when we can go knight d4. And the point being here, this is just very good because the queen takes, we've got bishop b2. So knight e7 makes sense. And now this knight e3 move, because we want c4 for the other bishop. And once we get there, knight g5 is yet again very interesting. If you want to play a bit more solid, you don't have to attack immediately. You can castle and get ready for play in the center, or knight g5 again with compensation. So there we go. And we're getting through most of the alternatives now. The only other one I would like to mention after our move c3 is e4 straight away. This has never been seen in a competition over the board, but it's been seen in a correspondence game. And a number of interesting possibilities, but I think a very unbalanced way to play. And another thing I should mention is that this is Kamil Plichter, the great chessable author. This is his choice on one of his chessable courses. So I think it's very important that we make sure we cover what he's done. We've got the advantage of hindsight, so it's easier for us to have a look at what Kamil suggested. Kamil is a brilliant analyst in the opening, so I really respect all of his work. And if he gives e4, it must be treated with some serious faults. And I expect the reason he's given e4 is because he realized that the other lines which we'll come on to, offer white good compensation. So he's looking at a way to try and trick us. And here, we should grab that bishop. And now white has to face this one, of course. And here, well, it's a move you might not want to play, but queen takes f3 leaves us with a horrible pawn structure. By the way, this check now we can block, so we're not losing a rook. After queen takes f3, pawn takes f3. But a really weird position to assess. I mean, this is probably one of the most ugliest pawn structures we're going to get in the course. But we have this bishop, right? We have this bishop, and this bishop is really good. You know, is this worth our pawn structure? Well, I'm going to argue yes. And Kamil thinks that black's a little bit better after knight e7, but I'm going to have to disagree with him here. Definitely have to disagree with him here. I expect the truth is somewhere in the middle, but our idea here is to use these open files. You know, we're going to use the G file, going to use the diagonal. We're going to come with our normal plan with the knight. So we're not too worried about our pawn structure because we have such great activity with our pieces. And Kamil now gives the line knight e7. And now bishop b2 is what we're going for in the position. It's also a little argument to be said for b5. I mean, I think even here that certainly I'd rather be white, because this is really cramping black's position, and our dodgy pawns they're not an issue yet. They're only going to be an issue later on if black can get his pieces out and consolidate. But with this one, our idea will be bishop g2, castles f4, and that bishop also becomes good. So this is also another way to play, I feel. So I think Camille claiming the edge there, not entirely correct. I like Camille. I'll just, we have the hindsight. We can analyze his ideas deeper. But we're even going for bishop b2, because after castles, which is following this correspondence game, rook g1, black is now, I'd say, forced to put the knight on this square. g6 looks very loosening with our knight coming into this square in a lot of situations, and even ideas of pushing over here. So knight g6 following the correspondence game. And now, well, of course, we're going to use my good friend Harry. We could have used this against g6 as well, and the same idea, but g6 is just inviting a knight into that square. And again, our pawn structure is really bad, but our activity and our bishop and our play, like a lot of gambits, you have to, it's a gambit for a reason. You give up something. We haven't, in this case, given up material, but we've given up our structure. But we've got lovely pieces. And how does black deal with this h4 move? Well, if he goes h5 to try and stop us, we just bring our last piece in, creating this as a threat. And let's not forget, in this opening, we can use our rooks in quite a peculiar way. Remember the rook coming up here? This is certainly one idea. And the other rook coming to g5 is another idea. I feel that black is in trouble here. So h5, clearly a mistake. Rook e8 check feels more natural to me, when our king should now come to d1. And now we don't want to allow knight f4 coming in there if we block the check. And now bishop e6 is a nice idea, because black's trying to get a counter-attack. Let's not fall into the check here and the checkmate on e1. So we've got to look at our opponent's moves. And a very good way to stop that is, again, using our rook. So we're now renewing the threat of h5. And I think this is like very logical play from both sides. This h5 move is now very hard to stop. The only way to stop it, well, you have to play h5. Otherwise, f6 doesn't quite work, because we're going to take on this square. And this gives us great play. So you have to play h5 as black here. And now rook g5 is interesting, but I like bringing another bishop into play, bishop d3. And while black has prevented this one, he remains under a lot of pressure on this g-file. And I'm not entirely sure how he's going to get rid of that pressure, mainly against g7. So this suggestion of Camille's, obviously respect it, but I think if we look a little bit deeper in those lines, even though we have this horrendous pawn structure, let's just go through that again, important variation. We go from start. Takes, we go a3, d5, main move. We take it, we go knight to f3, e5, now main move. And after e5, we take on b4. And then after bishop takes b4 here, we play c3. And now if e4, we can take this one and we can go for the ending, which is still very, very exciting. Let's go now to bishop e7, which is the most popular choice. Black feels that the bishop is safest here. On c5, it gets hit by d4. On d6, it gets hit by knight c4. And we continue with our plan now of knight a3. We want to try to create problems as quickly as we can. So now knight c6, I think, is the natural developing move. And again, black's main choice by quite some margin. Bishop takes a3 is horrible. Bishop takes a3. I'm just going to stop there. That diagonal with d4 coming at the right time, really not fun. We even have ideas of queen b1 here, very interestingly, and bishop here. This is another unique idea. Knight f6 is a normal way to develop, but let's now see our plan in action. Knight b5, and all of a sudden black realizes, oh, I have to defend that with a queen, and we can just take on e5. And I feel that, you know, this is fairly sensible. With knight c6, we just meet it with d4. And we have bishop coming into the game, and this is very nice. In actual fact, Richard Palliser did recommend this line for black with castles kingside in the old Fighting the Anti-Sicilians repertoire, but he's now decided that white is a lot better after bishop d3. And we're not even a pawn down here. I mean, black's maybe only idea is to try and win a pawn with this one, but we're going to hang on to that one. And he now suggested bishop g5, and he stopped here. But in his notes, he said he didn't know why he avoided the move bishop g3. And this is good for white. One line, we'll go a little bit further. Rook e8, castles, knight takes here. Maybe he now says that he missed the move knight d6. We've given our sacrifice pawn back, but with this move, we're threatening the rook. You can't take this one because of bishop h7. And we're also threatening bishop takes knight, rook takes f4, forking. So, nice line. So, knight a3, knight to f6, knight b5 already seems a little bit tricky for black. Because we're going to win our pawn back, and we haven't even got the sacrifice. So, black has to be careful. Now, e4, this idea that Camille has said, it is quite interesting. But it's not going to stop us going forwards. We will go forwards. This threat is bigger than them all. Queen d8. And now knight to d4. And surprisingly, this position has yet to be tested, again showing how unique these positions are. And now we will probably grab that pawn given a chance. a6 does not force our knight away, so we don't need to fear that move. So knight c6 is a better developing move. And now we want to increase the pressure in any way we can. And another, we've seen using this diagonal, a3 to f8. But what about using this diagonal, a4 to e8? And this eyes up both of these two ones. The pressure remains in this position with, let's say, this move here, bishop a3 coming next. And these are kind of the really fun lines where your knight starts to get in and stopping black castling. So after knight a3, it's actually a little bit tricky for black. There's nothing very simple that black can play. And knight c6 is the move which at least stops this idea of knight e5. But okay, let's continue. We throw our knight into the position. And now the standard retreat, queen d8. I mean, queen d7 just looks very clumsy. And now we go back to that idea we saw in the model game. And this is a key idea in this position. We want to open the structure. I say luckily, but not really luckily is the wrong word. But if we had a pawn on a2, these positions would be much less effective. Because when a6 is played, we'd have to move our knight. But without a pawn here, a6 is not threatening our knight because of this file. So our knight here can remain there for quite some time. And the standard response to any queen retreat is to d4. But let's have a look at it in the best way after queen d8, the best way for black. Well, we play d4, of course, and we get this free-flowing game. And this is one of the main lines. And we're not giving black a moment to rest. And this is, as we saw, very dangerous for black. And we're back into that position that I had against Dragon, pretty much, I think, where Dragon took on d4, and this allowed bishop f4. Let's just show a little bit of that game again. And after king f8, well, I played the very interesting move bishop c4. I was trying to just develop like morphing. But in actual fact, Richard Palliser has shown an improvement. And the improvement here over that Dragon game is knight c7. The rook has to move. And now he just gives the tamer knight takes d4. We're only a pawn down, and we're not playing in such a tactical manner here, because if we can win another pawn back, we're doing great. Black, look at those guys. He's moved his king. So, for example, knight takes d4. We can even take with a queen. And this is the kind of move that I've come now to appreciate more and more. You know, and I realize that even when attacking, you don't have to avoid the queen exchange. Throughout this course, we've seen that you have to use the queen exchange to get advantages. You can't avoid it at all cost. You know, it's just ridiculous. And in this kind of position here, the king can even come to e2. And, you know, this looks pretty good for white. I mean, d1. The problem with coming to d1 is that this check, f3, allows rook d8. So if you come to e2, we're not going to get hit by a check here. And funnily enough, this does look pretty good for white, this position. We're threatening just to take here. Our knight is threatening e6 check, winning that rook. We're also threatening ideas like knight d5, attacking the rook and the bishop. Our king is, you know, if the check comes now, we can play f3. We just avoid that little tactic. And we're going to be winning the exchange minimum. So actually, black's just in serious trouble. So going back to d4, pawn takes d4, bishop f4, rook b8. Sorry, knight, king f8, knight comes in as the new idea. And now knight takes d4. Maybe bishop d7 is more sensible. Well, here, now we do play bishop c4. And this was actually played a couple of years after my game against Dragon in a game Kutsanyan versus Nidlako Mukachevo 2017. And white has brilliant play here. Now we're threatening to come in, castle. So the game continued. Rook c8, queen h5. Yes, this is one. So the thing is, actually, this main line, which you're most likely to get, is one of the most fun lines as well. We've seen some of the other lines, you know, your compensation's there, but you're not getting direct attack. The most popular defense of black seems to give white great play. And that's something we love, yeah, because black's most likely to play this way. And now black resigned because he can't defend. He can't defend f7. If g6, we go queen d5. And it's game over. Knight is coming to e6 after this one. So sweet victory. So knight b5, the main line, queen d8, d4. There's not a great deal of theory on this. And it's very tough for black. Another mistake he can do is bishop g4. And this also fails to appreciate the strength of our d pawn. You know, we can use that pawn. And after d5, d6 will simply be winning if the knight moves. Because we go d6. Let's say the knight goes, we go d6 and we've got knight c7 coming. So e4 is maybe a counter try that could be played. But it's a very clever move here. And again, it's getting out of the pin. Queen a4. And this is establishing not just ideas against the king, but a very strong cross pin there, we call it. And the queen can't take this pawn because of our knight, of course. And this is pretty much winning. After taking on f3, we take on d6. Black's king is weaker. And after this one, we get a little forced line here. And now c takes b5. And now queen comes into g7, and this is very good. We can take this rook and come back to d4. So according to the analysis, e4 is really the only thing that black can try. But now we can just, if you want to look at this line, just to remind you to move, we're playing d5 again. And we studied this line in the model game, so I don't want to repeat myself. So that's the game Williams-Dragon that I played, this all Grandmaster Clash. And we analysed that there and in the move trainer. And just to let you know, white has quite a good game there as well. So to sum up this main line, and let's just go through it. After b4 takes, we go a3. d5 the main move. I don't even know if it's the best thing black can do, because after pawn takes, queen takes, we stop that check. And after e5, again the main move, just a takes b4, the simple solution, with the idea of going c3 first, then bringing the knight to b5. Knight b5 will force the queen to retreat. When the queen does retreat, we hit with d4, and that opens up more lines. We have the idea, bring the bishop to f4, the bishop to c4. Fantastic, fantastic active play in a lot of these lines. If that pawn is not taken, we can always push it on, remember, to this square. And there's a lot of fun to be had here, a lot of fun. So that simple plan, I think, knight coming there, c3, d4 is the one to remember in these main lines.